job of any company, corporation, is to maximize their profit. They want to make as much money as they can possibly make. Now, this is the primary concern of pretty much any corporation or any company, with secondary concerns of maybe human welfare, environmental concerns, and everything else. But let's be very clear. The primary concern is the thing that sets the game space. That's the logic of the system itself to which we operate, this kind of, capitalistic umbrella that we all operate under, this conceptual system. Pursuant to that, we never ask the questions on how things get made. So let's take Apple, for example. Now, Ralph Nader does an amazing deconstruction of how Apple makes this cash. No one asks the question on, should those iPhones cost that much? Who are the people that make those iPhones? What are the conditions that those people are in when they're making those iPhones? The fact of the matter is, most of iPhones are made at Foxconn. And I don't want to step on Nader, so I'm going to let Nader do an amazing dismantling of how Apple makes its profits. But ultimately, like any other company, cut costs of labor, meaning attack labor, while simultaneously charging for a particular thing. Now, in Apple's case, the cost of the iPhone is not necessarily commensurate with what it takes to make an iPhone, in which case it charged outrageous prices. Not to mention borrowing because of the low interest rates. Apple's system is a bit bizarre, but I don't necessarily know if it's all that uncommon, seeing as other companies were also borrowing with the low interest rates. But in this particular case, Ralph Nader deconstructs Apple, and it is a thing to behold. This is on Ralph Nader's channel. Ralph Nader, activist, long time. The reason that you have your seatbelt today is because of Ralph Nader. And he is hated by the Democratic Party. Because instead of owning up to the fact that Al Gore failed miserably to that goofball, Al Gore didn't even win his own state. And not just that, he lost hundreds of thousands of votes of Democrats in Florida. It's nonsense. But it doesn't stop them from having this warped perspective of the world that Nader wasn't supposed to run. Either we have a representative government or not, meaning people can run with people voting on them if they believe that person represents their interests. No, you have Democrats who want essentially a two-party dictatorship where their failures, to some degree, are undermined by the maligning of people like Nader or Stein or Dorr or Susan Sarandon or whoever else that comes up that they don't necessarily want to take responsibility for their own fuck-ups. So let's take a look at Nader do his thing. Now, this is not Nader in the flesh, but I will play clips of Nader so you would have something to associate him with. Oh, damn. Maybe I can't do that. All right, let's just play the video. Give me 1 second. There we go. Fix this. All right, let's kick this off.
Apple hit $1 trillion in asset valuation, the first company in the history of the world to have its stock worth $1 trillion or more. So it made big news. And the business press went overboard. Oh, amazing. What a business model. How brilliant CEO Tim Cook is. What's next? Is it going to be another record? And so I took that apart. And basically what we have is a business model by Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, that is fundamentally relying on serf labor in one factory complex in China. They have 1.3 million workers in serf-like conditions. That's the contractor to Apple that makes the iPhones.
Wait, let's be clear on that first. So he's talking about Foxconn. Now, Foxconn, if you remember, is the corporation where people were offing themselves, throwing themselves off the roof of the building, throwing themselves off the roof of the building. There we go. This. I swear, OBS, man. Life and Death in Apple's Forbidden City. In an extract from his book, Brian Merchant reveals how he gained access to Longhua, the vast complex where iPhones are made and where in 2010 unhappy workers started killing themselves. Talk about aberrant behavior. You're in such horrendous conditions that you feel that the only way out is to off yourself. Now, I had a friend of mine, or you could say somebody who I work with, who loved his iPhone. And I didn't quite get it. It's like, it's a gadget with bells and whistles on it. It's nice. It's almost at this point, I think, a cultural phenomenon more so than a device that's for utility. But whatever, he loved his iPhone. And he never understood why I didn't give a shit about his iPhone. He thought that it was the greatest thing on the planet. Now, not caring the people who were in those horrendous conditions that were to the point where they were throwing themselves off the roof, not caring that the price was some ridiculous amount. He was a Hillary supporter. He was very comfortable from the standpoint of his living situation. All of us were software engineers. And in his mind, this is the greatest thing on the planet. Why do I care about how it was made? I don't even care that much about the cost because I can afford the cost. Human concerns in the capitalistic system are secondary. The primary concern is maximizing profit. You do that by attacking labor and getting either the products for as cheap as you can get it and labor for as cheap as you can get it. Both of those things are hindrances to the maximization of profits of the individuals at the top who want to expropriate the wealth. Let's keep going. Fucking Nader, he's awesome.
And then the other part of the business model is high-priced iPhones. I'll get to that in a minute. And the third leg of this three-legged stool is massive use of profits to buy back Apple stock. Now, if listeners don't think this affects a lot of people in this country, give me a few minutes. Number one, stock buybacks are not determined by the shareholders. There's no vote. There's no advice. It was determined by Tim Cook and maybe one or two other executives at the top, the hired hands. They have said earlier this year they're going to buy back $100 billion, that's with a B, of their stock. And the general press says, oh, that's good for shareholders. Guess what? Apple shareholders may have wanted more of that money distributed to them directly in cash dividends instead. That is a sign of mismanagement, that they have nothing else to do with this huge cache of profits from overpriced iPhones. They don't have anything better to do than to buy back their stock, which just incidentally increases the metric value of the executive compensation of Tim Cook and his colleagues at the top of this giant company. It doesn't do much for the stock. It may go up a little bit, may go down. There are far more serious things that are going to affect Apple stock as to whether there is going to be a new Samsung phone, whether tariffs are going to be applied by Trump on Chinese imports, which would include iPhones.
Let's pause there for the moment. He's making this point that, look, they're going to take this profit and all the incentives in the world go towards this, enrich themselves. Why wouldn't they do that? What is this thing that stops them from doing that? They're utterly detached, to some degree, for the most part, from the people below them. This is somewhat of a private fiefdom. And the people at the top are making decisions for the company. Great. Now, the decisions for the company also coincide with decisions that allow them to make more. Now, why wouldn't they do things to enrich themselves? People would say, well, they wouldn't be that brazenly. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. It is exactly what they're doing. This country reveres billionaires. And that is always bizarre to me, because ultimately that is somebody who has God knows how much sums of wealth. And you ask yourself, as a society, should an individual have that much wealth in relation to the other people in the society? And if that person has that much wealth, is that wealth that's not being used for the benefit of the masses? The answer is yes. There are trillions of dollars that is stored offshore from tax evaders, just like Apple, that could be used for the benefit of the country itself. I don't understand this thing where the people in the country revere people who are essentially getting fat off of their labor. You do the work, they expropriate the wealth. Why on earth is that something that people should revere? Let's keep going with Nader. And I'm not going to keep this long because I don't want to show his video, but I'm going to put his video at the bottom so you can see it for yourself. It's a really good video. But Nader is badass in general.
But just look at this figure for a moment before we talk about its uses. $100 billion is more than 10 years of the budget of the Environmental Protection Agency. More than 10 years. The agency in the federal government to protect worker health and safety, OSHA, their budget is $500 million. That's 0.5% of the stock buyback. Just to show you public expenditures on very important matters of health and safety compared to private affluence and waste. Now, what could they have done with this $100 billion? For $2 billion, a mere $2 billion, they would have doubled the wages of those 1.3 million workers in China.
Did you hear that? They borrowed $100 billion. And they're using that money for stock buybacks. Now, for $2 billion, it's a tiny percent, like 2% of that money could have gone to materially doubling the wages of the people who are making those products. That is not a consideration. That is not a consideration. Because again, that goes into this idea of cutting into their profits. This video, let's do a little bit more, but I can't show a lot of it. I mean, I guess I'm not showing any of it. You're just listening.
For another 2% of the $100 billion, they could have vastly improved the recycling and the protection of the environment and the workers who are exposed to used iPhones and used computer dismantling. Deadly work. Just $2 billion. They could have increased their employee salaries. They could have shored up the employee pension fund. They could have engaged in more research and development. They could have found productive investment to employ workers in this country for a change. They could have done any number of things. But instead, they bought back their stock, which I have called wasting, burning profits. And that is characteristic now of all these big successful companies. In the last 10 years, U.S. corporations have bought back $7 trillion of their stock. So Marxists of many, many generations ago could never have predicted that these corporations would make so much profit turned into capital, they didn't know what to do with it, other than to buy back the stock. I've written Tim Cook about this. I bought a few Apple shares, so I wrote him as a shareholder. Doesn't matter. Didn't answer. In fact, someone ought to do a project where non-shareholders send 10 letters to corporations, and shareholders send the same 10 letters asking for a response, asking for a reaction, asking for a disclosure. There's no difference. These barons at the top of these corporations, these private governments, don't feel they have any responsibility even to those people who own a part of their company.
Why would they? Why would they? I mean, after all the incentives into this go into people maximizing or enriching themselves. I am going to put the link to this video from Nader at the bottom. It is a really good video by Nader. I've only gone into, 5 minutes of this clip. And it's awesome. Let's see. Pet hacker, not wealthy. We just prefer cruel, cutthroat, wealthy. Yeah. Broken moral compass. There is a moral compass, Chris Foster. The moral compass is secondary to the first concern. How do I maximize my wealth? That maximization of wealth goes to the company, but it also goes to the individual within the company itself. All of us make these considerations. When I buy this particular product, I'm making a choice between this product and that product. And from the standpoint of the company, if I choose workers, do I want to choose workers in the United States or do I want to choose workers in China? Oh, I could get the workers in China for $3. I'm going for the workers in China for $3. Part of this thing with NAFTA, this sucking jobs out of the United States, the incentives go in that direction, so the company goes in that direction. The morality of it is secondary. I hope you understand what I mean by this. Morality is secondary into the political and into the capitalist process. The first modus operandi is maximization of profit. Super strike 9, but I thought corporations were people too. Corporations are machines designed to maximize profit. That's all they are. That's all they are. If a company can dump waste into the river and save money and get away with it, the company would dump waste into the river and save money to get away with it. The idea that the kid gets cancer is secondary to the concerns of the company in this situation. If a company can ship a job overseas and strip on the American worker out of a $15 an hour job, that company would do that if it thinks it can maximize its profit in that way. If it can somehow use the fact that it's keeping its job in the United States and get something out of it in this case, it may do that. But we need to be very clear that the first modus operandi is maximizing profit, attacking workers, avoiding taxes, cheaper products. And even this thing of societal waste. Like, you know, like coal companies or like oil companies blowing stuff into the sky as opposed to containing it. Well, yes, we may be able to contain it, but it's more expensive to try to contain it, so it's easier to just blow it into the sky and just allow the federal government to deal with that. Climate change is your issue. We're a company, we're trying to make money. You deal with the climate change. They've put on the society things that were associated with them, meaning we take the consequences of it. So in fracking areas, there's a story that I want to do where kids are coming up with fracking chemicals in their blood. In Flint, the governor makes a cynical choice to move the water system because it's cheaper. He's a Republican. He's less sympathetic. He doesn't necessarily care. And by the way, from the standpoint of the worker, the individual worker in this is just trying to make their way. People in West Virginia, for example, I've used West Virginia as examples in other situations, coal country. West Virginia essentially powered the nation. And then when the country decided it wanted to leave coal, West Virginia got the shaft. That's not necessarily fair to the people of West Virginia. And if we're being honest, there needs to be a program to help anybody that was in a coal company make their way from point A to point B in a way that doesn't necessarily adversely affect them, because it makes all the sense in the world, from the incentives of the individuals involved in West Virginia in those coal factories to want to keep those coal factories open, even though those coal factories is fucking over the country. Just saying, man. We have a fucked up system, and that system needs to change. If you do the work, you need to get the profits from that work. This is not even at that point of the capitalistic system itself. Or I guess it does hit the system itself or takes a plank out of it. But it's just the basic idea that makes all the sense in the world, that if you are doing labor and that labor creates a certain degree of profit, you should be the one that keeps that profit. And this idea that we have these capitalists who are floating about, you know, it's like we had kings and queens at one point thinking that these people were appointed by God. You have a society that's organized around capital, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of us are not capitalists. It's nonsense. Soviet winter prison, all humans deserve human rights. Yes, human rights movement. Human rights movement. I'll end this here. Our world needs to change. I've taken on the Jeremy Corbyn idea. They make this point of saying a different world is possible, and that's true. But you can't get there by propping up the system in the way the system is. This world needs to change. The biggest problem with that, to some degree, is also us, because all the incentives go into it. Rick Snyder, he swapped the water system back for GM as the Flint water was so corroding the auto parts. That's amazing. He swapped the water system back for General Motors as the Flint water was so corroding the auto parts. It was also corroding the materials that people were having in their housing, so that stuff was dropping lead and other chemicals in the water. Yeah. All right, this one has gone long, but Skip Rock, Canada owes me welfare. What? Are you planning on doing more stories today, Jamal? Yes, I am Soviet winter prison. It's raining here in Lisbon, so any notion of touring is kind of out of the way. So we'll be, at the very least, I will be stuck in the house. So yeah, I'll be done in news. Oh, by the way, my GoFundMe to save Sam Cedar's abused work wife, I have a taker. All of the money for this goes towards Center Against Domestic Violence. All of it. Every last dime that's donated to this. I am trying to raise $1,000 for the Center Against Domestic Violence. Pursuant to that, I'm also trying to save Sam Cedar's abused work wife. This brutish man is stopping the radical. Either that or Michael Brooks is insane, or disingenuous. Radical, brave, vote Clinton. That takes a certain degree of mental gymnastics. I don't think he's insane. I think he's being serious. But he's working for Cedar. Capitalist. This is not a capitalist, I'm just saying. But Danny Knapp, shout out to Danny Knapp for supporting Center Against Domestic Violence. Thank you. We will save Brooks. We will save Brooks. All right. I'll end it here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Yeah, it is going to a good cause, Danny. All of it is going to a good cause. So, thanks all. I'll be back in a short moment.